Stay with me until the end and drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to know who's out there listening. Because what I'm about to tell you didn't happen overnight. There were years of small moments, small hurts, small warnings. I brushed off because I loved my daughter too much to see what was right in front of me. And maybe that's where I should start. Not with a text message, not with the phone ringing off the hook at 2 a.m, but with a Tuesday afternoon in October when I stood in my kitchen making a pot of chicken and dumplings and realized I couldn't remember the last time my daughter had called me just to talk. Not to ask for something, just to talk. My name doesn't matter much for this story. What matters is that I'm 63 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee. And for the better part of the last decade, I poured everything I had, money, time, energy, love, into keeping my daughter's family afloat. And I do mean everything. Let me back up. My daughter. I'll call her my daughter throughout this because that's who she is and that's how I think of her. Married her husband when she was 26. I liked him well enough at first. He was charming the way some men are charming when they want something. Good handshake, good smile. Always called me ma'am. My late husband, God rest him, said the day after the wedding, I hope she knows what she married. I told him he was being too hard on the boy. I think about that a lot now. They settled about 40 minutes from me, which felt like a blessing at the time. Close enough to see the grandchildren on weekends. Far enough that I wasn't in anybody's business. I had my retirement from 28 years of teaching middle school. I had the house paid off. I had a little savings. Not wealthy. Comfortable. The way you're comfortable when you spent your whole adult life being careful. The first time they asked to borrow money, my grandson was 4 months old. They needed help with the hospital bill. Something about the insurance having a gap because my son-in-law had just switched jobs. $5,000. I wrote the check without a second thought because that's what you do. That's what family does. I didn't even call it a loan. I just gave it. The second time was 8 months later. Car trouble, $2,200. The third time I stopped counting. By the time my grandson turned 2 and my granddaughter was born, I was covering their grocery runs when things got tight, sending gift cards for the kids that I knew perfectly well were being used for household expenses and paying the deposit on a new apartment after they got behind on rent. My daughter always had an explanation. Her husband was between contracts. The freelance work dried up. The baby had an ear infection and she'd missed a week at her part-time job. There was always a reason, and the reasons were always just believable enough. I want to be fair here. My daughter is not a bad person. I need to say that clearly, because this story could make her sound like one, and she's not. She got caught up in a life that was too expensive for what they were actually earning. Married to a man who was better at spending than saving. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as her mother, and started seeing me as her mother, and started seeing me as the solution to whatever problem came up that month. I don't think she did it consciously. I think she just stopped thinking about it at all. That's almost worse, in a way. The year my granddaughter turned 3, I helped them with a down payment. $40,000 from the account my husband and I had been building since 1987. I told myself it was an investment in their stability. I told myself once they had the house, things would settle down. I told myself a lot of things that year. Things did not settle down. The requests kept coming, just in different shapes. Could I take the kids every weekend so they could have couple time? Could I cover the after-school program because the timing didn't work with her husband's schedule? Could I chip in for the family vacation because it would mean so much to the grandchildren to have me there? Every single time I said yes. And every time I said yes, I felt a little more invisible. Like I wasn't a grandmother being invited along. Like I was the trip's financial sponsor who happened to be related. I started noticing other things too. When I called, my daughter would pick up about half the time. When she didn't, she'd text back hours later. Short answers, no questions about how I was doing. When I visited, her husband was almost never home. And when he was, he'd disappear into another room within 20 minutes. My grandchildren were happy to see me. which was the thing that kept me driving those 40 minutes every time. My grandson, who was 6 by then, would run down the driveway when he saw my car. That boy. He's the reason I held on as long as I did. But there were moments that cut. One Sunday I drove over with a lasagna and a birthday cake for my daughter, her 32nd birthday, and she answered the door on the phone, held up one finger at me, walked back inside, and didn't get off that call for 25 minutes. I sat at the kitchen table alone with my lasagna getting cold and my cake sitting on the counter, and I thought, I drove 40 minutes for this. I didn't say anything. I just smiled when she finally sat down, and we had a quiet lunch, and she thanked me for the cake, and I drove home. I cried in the car. Not dramatically, just the quiet kind of crying that happens when you've been patient for so long, you don't even know what you're sad about anymore. That was in March. By July, I'd started keeping a record, not because I was planning anything, mostly because I needed to see it clearly myself. I wrote down every amount I gave, every time I asked to see the grandchildren and got a rescheduled, every phone call that went to voicemail. I'm a former teacher. I process things by writing them down. When I added up the numbers at the end of that summer, I sat very still for a long time. In 6 years, I had given my daughter's family just over $94,000. Some of it gifts, some of it loans that were never repaid. Some of it things I'd bought directly. Appliances, car repairs, school supplies, the down payment. $94,000. That was more than 3 years of my annual retirement income. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my friend from church who'd known me 40 years, nobody. I just closed the notebook and put it in my bedside drawer and went about my week. August turned into September. The kids went back to school. My daughter texted me a photo of my grandson on his first day of 2nd grade, backpack nearly as big as he was, grinning like he owned the world, and I smiled at my phone for about 10 minutes straight. Whatever complicated feelings I had about her, that boy was pure joy. Then September turned into October, and October's when everything changed. My 63rd birthday fell on a Wednesday that year. A Wednesday. I wasn't expecting a party. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. A phone call, maybe dinner that weekend. I'd mentioned it to my daughter 2 weeks before, casually, just working it into the conversation. Can you believe I'll be 63? Something like that. Wednesday morning I woke up and made my own coffee and waited. No call by 9. No call by noon. I told myself she was busy with the kids' school pickup. No call by 3. I sent a light text, just a smiley face and a thinking of you today to my grandson, nothing that would make her feel pressured. No response. At 7 that evening, I ordered myself a small dinner from the Thai place I like, ate it alone at my kitchen table, and watched a show I'd been meaning to catch up on. It was a perfectly fine evening, objectively. But I sat there in my house, alone, on my birthday, and the phone never rang. Not once. I didn't cry that night. I was past crying by then. I just felt very, very clear. I slept on it. Then I slept on it another night. Then on Friday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my financial advisor and made an appointment, not because I had made any decisions yet, just because I needed someone outside the situation to help me see the full picture. We met the following Tuesday. I brought my notebook. My advisor, a no-nonsense woman who has been managing my accounts since my husband passed, looked at the numbers, looked at me, and said very quietly, "How long has this been going on?" I told her 6 years. She didn't gasp or shake her head or do any of the things people do when they're being dramatic about your problems. She just nodded slowly and said, "And what are you thinking about doing?" I told her I wasn't sure yet, but I was thinking about making some changes to my will. She pulled up the documents we'd set up years ago. In my original will, I had left the bulk of my estate split between my daughter and a small educational trust for the grandchildren. Standard, sensible, what most people would do. But as I sat there looking at those numbers, the $94,000 already gone, the retirement account that was smaller than it should have been, I started asking questions I had never asked before. What if I restructured things so the grandchildren's trust was managed by a third party? What if any future financial support came with written terms, the way a real loan would? What if I stopped treating my love for my family like a blank check and started treating it like what it actually was, something finite, something worth protecting? My advisor suggested I speak with an estate attorney. I made that appointment too. I drove home from that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter and more solid than either of those. I felt like myself again, like the woman who taught 200 kids how to read a book critically, who'd raised a daughter on one income after her father got sick, who'd made every dollar count because she had to. That weekend, I made a decision. I called my daughter on Sunday afternoon. She picked up on the fourth ring, which was unusual. "Hey, Mom," she said, distracted. I could hear the television in the background. I told her I wanted to have dinner. Just the two of us, no kids, no her husband. I told her there were some things I wanted to talk about. There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I just think it's overdue." She agreed to the following Saturday. I made a reservation at a restaurant I liked. Not expensive, not a statement, just a place with good food and enough ambient noise that no one could hear us. Saturday came. She was 12 minutes late, which didn't surprise me. She looked tired. I noticed that. Whatever complicated feelings I had, she was still my child, and she looked tired. We ordered. We made small talk. And then when the food came, I set down my fork and I said, "I've been doing some thinking about the last few years, about money, and about our relationship, and about some patterns I've let go on too long." She looked up. I didn't attack her. I didn't list every grievance. I simply laid out, as clearly and calmly as I could, what I had seen, the financial support that had become an expectation rather than a gift. The gradual disappearance of genuine connection, the birthday that passed without a call. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mum, we've just been really overwhelmed." "I know," I said, "and I've tried to help with that, but I think the way I've been helping hasn't actually helped. I think it's made things easier to avoid dealing with." Another silence, longer this time. "What are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying I love you, and I love those grandchildren more than anything on this earth. And I'm saying that I've made some changes to how I'm going to handle things going forward. Not to punish you, because I need to protect what I have left, and because I think some things need to change between us before I can keep going the way we've been going." I told her I had restructured my will. The grandchildren's trust was now managed independently. It would be there for their education regardless of anything else, and it couldn't be accessed by anyone else. Future financial help, if and when I chose to give it, would come with a written agreement. Not because I didn't trust her, because I needed there to be clarity. She didn't respond for a long time. She looked at her plate. I watched her process it. Finally, she said, "Did you talk to a lawyer?" "I did." "When did you do all this?" "Over the past few weeks." She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her face. Not anger, which I had half expected. Something more like recognition. Like she was seeing for the first time that I was a person with a limit, not just a resource without one. "I didn't call you on your birthday," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "No," I said, "you didn't." She put her hand over her face for a moment. When she brought it down, her eyes were wet. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't, not entirely. I said, "I know," and I meant it gently. We talked for another 2 hours. Real talking. The kind we hadn't done in years. She told me things about her marriage I hadn't known. About the stress she'd been carrying. About how she'd let herself start treating me like a safety net. Because I'd always been one, and she'd stopped being afraid I'd ever go away. She said it so plainly that it broke my heart a little and clarified everything at the same time. I drove home that night with the windows down even though it was cold. I needed the air. The following week, her husband called me. I almost didn't answer. We had never had a real conversation, just the performance of one. But I picked up. He was uncomfortable. You could hear it. He cleared his throat twice before saying anything of substance. And what he said surprised me. I know I haven't made it easy. For you. And I want to change that if you'll let me. I didn't gush. I didn't forgive everything in a moment. I said, I'd like that, but it's going to take time and it's going to take consistency. Not a couple of good months and then back to the way things were. He said he understood. I wasn't sure I believed him, but I was willing to find out. Over the next few months, things changed in small ways. My daughter called more, not every day, but regularly, and not just when something was wrong. She drove to see me twice without the kids, just to have lunch and sit in my living room and talk the way we used to when she was younger. My son-in-law started acknowledging me when I visited, not warmly at first, but present. There. My grandson still runs down the driveway when he sees my car. I haven't given any large sums of money since that dinner. A birthday gift here, a contribution to the school supply list there. Normal grandmother things, not rescue operations. It feels different. It feels like love instead of leverage. My will is still restructured. The attorney and I revisited it last month and I made a few more adjustments, set up a timeline for when the grandchildren's trust becomes accessible to them directly, added language about what happens if certain conditions aren't met. My daughter knows about it. We talked about it openly, which felt strange at first and then felt like exactly the right way to handle things. I still think about that birthday. The Wednesday. The Thai food I ordered alone. I think about it not with bitterness, but with something like gratitude, because it was the night I finally stopped pretending I was fine with how things were. It was the night something in me went very quiet and very decided. I'm 63 years old. I taught school for 28 years. I raised my daughter mostly on my own after my husband got sick. I kept every promise I ever made to my family. And I had spent 6 years slowly disappearing from my own life trying to hold together someone else's. I'm not disappearing anymore. If you've been sitting with something like this, if you've been giving and wondering when it stops being love and starts being something else, I want you to know you're allowed to draw a line, not out of anger, not to punish anyone, just because you matter too, just because what you have left is worth protecting. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me I'm not the only one watching from a quiet house, making sense of things one day at a time. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the dinner, not the lawyer's office, not even the Wednesday birthday that passed without a single call. It's a much smaller moment. It's me sitting in my car in the parking lot of that Thai restaurant after I ordered dinner for one, engine off, looking at my phone with no new notifications and thinking, how did I let it get this far? The honest answer is that I let it happen one small yes at a time. That's usually how it goes. Nobody decides to disappear from their own life all at once. You just keep choosing the other person's comfort over your own honesty, and you call it love. And after enough years, you look up and realize you've been so busy being someone's safety net that you forgot you were a person standing on your own 2 feet. What I had to learn. And I don't think I fully understood this until I sat across from my daughter at that restaurant, is that doing the right thing requires more than good intentions. It requires clear thinking. I had the intentions for years. I gave and told myself that was enough. But good intentions without honest judgment aren't wisdom. They're just sentiment, and sentiment on its own doesn't protect you or the people you love. It just keeps the peace until the peace runs out. My daughter is not a villain in this story. I want to be clear about that. She got comfortable in a way that people do when no one ever pushes back. And I didn't push back for 6 years because I was afraid that setting a limit would feel like withdrawing my love. What I finally understood, sitting with that notebook full of numbers, talking to my advisor, walking out of that attorney's office, is that a limit isn't the opposite of love. A limit is what love looks like when it's trying to last. That took courage to act on. I don't say that to congratulate myself. I say it because I know how many women my age are sitting in quiet houses right now, keeping the peace, writing the checks, waiting for a phone call that doesn't come, getting up and having that dinner conversation. Calmly, without cruelty, without collapsing. That took everything I had. It would have been so much easier to just keep going. Easier is not the same as better. What changed things wasn't the money. The money was the symptom. What changed things was that I finally showed my daughter I had a backbone, that I was a full person with a limit and a life worth protecting. And somehow that, more than 6 years of generosity, was what made her see me clearly for the first time in a long time. My grandson still runs down the driveway when he sees my car. That hasn't changed, and now when my daughter calls, she asks how I'm doing before she says anything else. It's a small thing. It took 6 years and one hard conversation to get here. I'll take it.